Thank you, Sarika. And good morning. Thanks for all of you for being here today. I'm going to be talking about how we at Thoughtworks took something we called as we just heard, support function to actually becoming a business driver. And I have stories to tell about how this journey happened. I think I like the word from what I heard from Rich and Evan is about facilitating organization, or facilitating function, or facilitating organization. And I think that's how we need to look at supporting or what we traditionally tend to call departments, divisions, subdivisions, or functions, right? Even some of these words, right? Departments, divisions, they sound like, oh, you are a part of the same organizations, but not. They kind of indicate that you're dealing with silos, verticals, people who aren't talking to each other. So, next one. So this has been our journey. In 2010, I took on the role of head of information systems at Thoughtworks. And I remember in the first few days, there's a project manager who walked up to me and he basically said, Rajesh, my project needs 6 servers really urgently, we need that like yesterday. And I gave him the same answer that all my predecessors had been saying. Oh, well, you know what, too bad. It's going to take 6 weeks to get you that. And I knew very well at that point of time that 6 weeks meant that he would absolutely have no use for that stuff after that time. Not only that, we would have lost credibility with the customer. We would have lost revenues on that project. So I'd love to say I changed all that and went in there, fixed everything, and that would be a lie. It's been a long journey. It's taken us over 7 years, 8 years now to get to where we are. And we haven't stopped. We continue to evolve. So let's see how that happened. All right, speed bumps. I was recently, a few months ago, I was at one of India's largest IT companies, and I was supposed to do a workshop over there with them. On my way, in the rush to get there, I forgot to carry Post-its. I forgot to carry markers, and I forgot to carry a cable that would let me connect my Mac to the TV. So when I got there, I said, okay, no problem. Let's get started. Can someone get me to get this to me? And this was an agile team. This was an IT agile team. And they said, no, we can't do that. We can't get you this stuff. I said, why? Oh, well, you should have put in the requisition like several weeks ago. You should have let us know that you need all this stuff, and now it's too late. It's not going to happen today. And really, similarly, I've heard stories about in a bank where it took the team about 3 or 4 months to get a whiteboard, and this was a bank which was doing agile transformation. Now, these examples might sound trivial. Like, okay, what's the big deal? It's just markers. It's just a whiteboard. It's just all this stuff. It's not really that. These are symptoms of the fact that organizations create internal barriers to getting things done. It prevents people from getting their jobs done, and these are symptomatic of we see this all around us. I mean, one of the questions would be how easy was it for you to get to this conference? How many hoops did you have to jump through? Well, that's something to think about. So when I saw this one, I really laughed the first time I saw it. But I have to admit, I'm really ashamed to admit this, I have actually been responsible for some of this stuff when we are doing information security at Thoughtworks. If you follow Formula One, right, you know that it just isn't about a great driver and a great car that wins races. The pit crew is a critical part of that team, a critical part of the team that really helps win races. And probably this is for me, this is a metaphor that like that really gets me. That makes that aha thing for me, where how should things work within an organization. So if there's one metaphor like I would like you to take away from this talk is about the pit crew being like those things that are needed for a business to run, for it to be able to continue to operate and win races. Next one. So how did we get there? I don't think there's a silver bullet. And I think based on the nature of an organization, the nature of a business, it might mean different things for different people. But for me, there are 5 things that really stood out. 5 things that I believe were the catalysts for us, for our change. And though I'm talking about these in terms of, of a facilitating function, that went, where we applied all this, I don't think it matters. I think, in my opinion, it's probably relevant for any part or any the thing of whether it's a core business or any function within the organization. So, first thing is like think design. It's about design thinking. In his book, Change by Design, Tim Brown describes this. Incident where there were a few engineers who were observing how their teleconferencing equipment is being used. And so they're observing how the customer uses that. And what they saw was that there's this lady, and she went in there for the conference. She took a bunch of phones, one phone for each participant she wanted on the conference, dialed each of them individually, put all of them on speaker, and she had a teleconference. And the engineers went, "That's not how you use our stuff." And like, read the freaking manual. Like, that's not the point. The point was that it wasn't designed, the equipment wasn't designed with the customer in mind. If the end user experience had been different, it would the way the customer uses the product would have changed. And in fact, it should have been the other way around. We have a similar example. A few years ago, we were doing this entire revamp of our Wi-Fi network, and the network team kind of were really excited about this new product. Sure. So the network team was really excited about this new product that was theirs, and the bunch of features that it offered, and says, "Oh, we want this. We are going to do this." When we had a look at how how that would translate into a user experience, we realized it's going to be terrible. We would have to make our users jump through a lot of hoops before they could, get something useful done. So we said, okay, you know what? Let's try something else. Let's go and ask our users how they want us to, what a good experience looks like for them. And well, surprisingly, the feedback that we got from them was, okay, you know what? Things should just work. Keep things simple. Don't make us think about stuff. So, of course, the team went back and said, okay, let's keep this as simple, as frictionless as possible, and we got something really good. There's something we can take from software design. I know this is like we are going towards technology and software, but there's something called as a good API design. What does a API as an application programming interface? A good API is one that hides the complexity of the implementation from the consumer. So the consumer knows if I give something, I'm going to get something. And that's as easy as it gets. But whatever internal complexity is hidden behind this service, API facade. And I believe that that's how we should also be looking at the production services that we design for our consumers. Whether it's you're in part of the business or whether you're part of a facilitating organization. Hide the complexity from your users. Can you go to the next one? So I don't know how many times I've, especially in context of IT agile, when I'm talking to managers, hear people say, "Oh, we have organization, we promote, we encourage people to fail," and all the time they're not talking about failure; they're talking about mistakes. They're talking about failures happening because there was someone who was incompetent doing that person's job incompetent. And that's not about how you fail. Failure is about being able to set up an experiment, right? If I do X, does that result in Y? And being able to test that hypothesis, right? If doing X does not lead to Y, you've learned at one thing that doesn't work that way, and you've learned how to learn to fail. Learn to fail at something and learn something new. The most inspirational story I've heard is of a farmer. His name is Gabe Brown, and he's from North Dakota. He basically farms over 4,000 acres of land in North Dakota, growing soya and corn. Over the last seven years, he has managed to cut down the consumption of pesticides and fertilizers by about 80%. He's a proponent of something called as no-till farming. In his own words, he claims that, well, you know what, I'm not the most productive farmer in North Dakota, but I am the most profitable farmer in North Dakota. There's a method to how Gabe Brown got to this point. Every year, Gabe and his son, Paul, run at least 4 experiments, out of which they must fail at least one. If they don't fail at one, it means that they aren't stretching themselves enough. And the point being that by doing this, they've, over a period of time, learned what works for them, and more importantly, what does not. And that's, for me, that's a really inspirational story, and this comes from a farmer in North Dakota. Sorry. Okay. All righty. Think small. I think a couple of years ago in China, we spent about $250,000 before we learned that the solution we had implemented, this was a technical solution supposed to fix something. It was after spending $250,000 we realized stuff doesn't work. It was really embarrassing. We had approached it the traditional way. We did a bigger upfront design. Okay, what do you want this thingy to do? Okay, this is what it takes. Went to someone, got them to design some stuff for us, got this approved, got the budgets done. And the first time we actually realized that it is not working is the time it was put into production. Now this is not how you fail. This is really the worst way to fail. In fact, after that, we had to kind of go back to our leadership team, which was not really very, very happy about the results, and say, okay, we're going to fix this, but we need more money. What? $250,000 later, you still need more money? Okay. So we just used a different approach after that. Like we said, okay, let's figure out, let's go to talk to our stakeholders. What are the outcomes that they're expecting out of this? Let's take each of those outcomes, make it into a small experiment, which links back to what I said earlier, and run them as a set of tiny experiments. So at each stage, we weren't spending a huge amount of money. we were doing things iteratively. We were taking tiny risks. And once we kind of disproved that whether stuff works or not, we then went on to kind of build on top of that. So I think that's something we kind of need to be able to figure out of how to do things. Sorry, what slide are we on? Okay. I think this is probably close to your heart, Evan. We are talking about vertical barriers that exist within organizations, and also horizontal barriers that we've seen created. In my first example, where I talked about this project managers coming and asking me for servers, one of the things that really took time was I had to navigate across different functions within our organization. I had to go to finance, procurement, legal, facilities and administration, and with each interface with this new function, I had to deal with the complexity that existed within those functions. What we have today is a very different scenario. We've got product teams. We have a product organization. I wouldn't call it an IT department anymore. I wouldn't call it information systems department anymore. We have a product organization. We have all what it takes to be able to deliver a product or a service. We have people, we have finance people sitting there. We have procurement, recruitment, user experience design, engineers, legal, everything that we need to completely deliver a product or a service. Similarly, horizontal boundaries. You see these as hierarchies inside those vertical silos, which is basically result in command and control structures. This recently, I was talking to a friend of mine. He's in the merchant navy, and he was telling me about an incident there was recently where a manager sitting in a port in Singapore was driving the priorities of the engineers on a ship at sea. What happened was, it resulted in a very dangerous situation where this person who's really abstracted from what's really happening on the ground almost had this ship end up dead at sea. This also is like reflected in kind of the leadership we see in some of the organizations, and I think we know the fix to this as well. An empowered team that can make their own decisions about setting their priorities, about making decisions, should be so. The conclusion is, of course, allow the people who are closest to the problem to make the decision about that. Next one. Sorry.
1 more minute. 1 more minute remaining.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, deliberate practice. This is probably the last one. All of what I've said so far doesn't happen automatically. It needs you to actually train people in doing it. It needs you to kind of make investments into making sure that this happens. Great on paper. How do you get it into practice? This is probably what it takes. So, if you know the 4 stages of learning, you get from unconscious incompetence, you don't know what you don't know, to conscious incompetence, you know what you don't know, to conscious competence, and you're practicing new skills until you reach the final stage where you achieved unconscious competence, which is you do things as second nature, but it takes a long time, and you've got to spend time and effort in doing that. So, it's never done, right? You've got, we got to a point where it no longer takes 6 weeks to get a server. People don't even come to us. And now we have got to the point where the innovations that we have made in information security and IT, we are actually taking them to our business and to our customers and helping other organizations actually be, achieve that within them. So it's kind of that whole transition from becoming the people who you went to for your laptop to people who are going to be right there on the front lines, talking to our customers, telling them how to fix those things within their organization. So it's been this journey for us. And before I leave you, there's some few books that are probably inspirational. And thank you for listening. And if you've got questions or comments, please come and meet me offline.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you so much. Just yeah.